Martial arts have informed all media for years, and video games are no different. And while games are yet to have anything approaching the iconic quality of martial arts movies, there have still been some great games over the years. Here are 15 such games. Shenmue. Many years have passed since Shenmue first came to the Sega's Dreamcast, but the series' massive fan following hasn't waned. Shenmue 1 introduced the industry to a style of game that was way ahead of its time. And though the combat wasn't the centerpiece, learning new combos and then pulling them off against enemies was deeply satisfying. Sleeping Dogs. Sleeping Dogs is perhaps one of the most underrated games to have come out last generation. From its engaging narrative to its vivid open-world depiction of Hong Kong, it was a game that had many strengths, but perhaps the biggest strength of them all was its combat. Brutal, slick, and stylish, taking on goons in the streets of Hong Kong never got boring. Absolver. Absolver wasn't a game without its faults, but anyone who's played it will tell you, when it came to its combat, when it worked, there was nothing quite like it. Absolver's melee-focused combat was stylish and complex, and it built on systems that added considerable depth to the experience. As the game progresses, keeping it all straight in your head can be a bit of a challenge, but pulling off one perfect move after another in the heat of combat is incredibly satisfying. Jade Empire. Though much lesser known than a lot of the other megatons BioWare has developed over the years, Jade Empire still has a strong and dedicated fanbase. And it's not hard to see why. It's probably one of the most unique games the studio's ever made, and everything from its visual style to its setting to the way it plays reflects that. Jade Empire's combat is a lot more action-oriented than most other BioWare games, at least during those times, but the relative simplicity of it doesn't do anything to detract from its quality. Enter the Matrix. Though Enter the Matrix may not have lived up to the massive hype it had built up prior to its launch all those years ago, it was at least a game that empowered the players to mow down huge mobs of enemies while looking cool as all hell. Other problems ultimately brought down the overall quality of the experience, but at least the combat, simple though it was a highlight. One Finger Death Punch. One Finger Death Punch is quite different from most games, if not all other games that you'll see in this feature, purely because of one reason. You play it, as the name suggests, with one finger. But don't let that outward simplicity fool you, because what you get when you jump in is a hell of a good time. Watching that little stick figure on your screen pulling off ridiculous moves to thrash other stick figures might sound like a dull concept on paper, but in reality it's anything but. True Crime Streets of LA. True Crime Streets of LA came at a time when GTA clones, to put it crudely, were a dime a dozen. But the action-adventure title probably stood out as one of the best of its kind. It integrated an engaging open-world environment with a compelling story. On the combat side of things, though the shooting itself could be bland at times, when it came to the martial arts-centric melee fights, combat encounters could get quite thrilling. It wasn't the most original game ever made, but as anyone who's played it will tell you, it was definitely, at least, worth a try. Shenmue 2. While Shenmue 1's combat was fun a lot of the time, it could still be frustratingly inconsistent. With Shenmue 2 though, things got a lot better. With more combos to learn and the systems that had already been in place being polished, combat in Shenmue 2 became a lot more polished overall. We can only hope that the upcoming third entry will continue that upward trajectory. Overgrowth. Overgrowth kinda seems like a super unique game at first glance, and that's really because it is. You're playing as a rabbit man thingy who's fighting to free other rabbit men thingies from an evil lord, and you're doing it by employing the ancient techniques of martial arts. So yeah, it's weird, but it's also a ton of fun. Shaolin vs. WUTANG. Shaolin vs. WUTANG doesn't hide its love for classic films about kung fu and the martial arts, and thankfully it does justice to that love. It pays wonderful homage to said films, not only with its aesthetic, but also because it's actually a ton of fun to play. It's quite unique from other fighters on the market, in that it's a lot more casual and a lot more about the visual thrill than anything else, but it works, and it works very well. SHUYAN Saga. Part visual novel, part action title, SHUYAN Saga is surprisingly unique. The latter parts are what help make it onto this list, and though they're not incredibly deep, they pay excellent homage to the martial arts, making SHUYAN Saga's fights accessible, yet a ton of fun. Toribash. Free to play, turn-based, and based on ragdoll physics. Hearing all those three things to describe a game might make you turn away in dismissal, but that would be kind of a mistake. Turn-based ragdoll kung fu sounds weird for sure, but in practice it's a hell of a lot of fun. It can be incredibly complicated to learn, sure, but it's free, so the only thing it requires is time, and once you get into it, it's well worth the effort. Yakuza 0. Yakuza 0 allows you to mix and string up all manner of moves, from the unimaginative but reliable punching and kicking, to the more brutal attacks inflicted upon an enemy's body, to really imaginative and over-the-top environmental breakdowns. Majima's fourth fighting style, which is called the Mad Dog of Shimano, is spectacular, but the true satisfaction comes from learning its various nuances. Stringing together combos is fun and addictive, and it ends up feeling extremely satisfying. Judgment. Judgment employs the Fujao Pai fighting style, which is a type of Chinese martial art. This makes the combat a hell of a lot of fun. Beating fools to a pulp with flashy over-the-top moves is a sight to behold. Yakuza's fighting system's winning formula is very much intact here, and Judgment doesn't mess with that. The Matrix: Path of Neo. The Matrix: Path of Neo has garnered a massive cult following in the years since its release, and it's a game that deserves all the love that it receives. For its time, it probably had one of the best combat systems that you'd ever see in a game. It's reasonably system-based, but very much as accessible as other games on this list, and it's worth the time investment 10 times over. And that wraps it up. If you like what we're doing, please consider subscribing to our channel. We upload new videos daily. Also, don't forget to switch on the bell notification icon, that way you don't miss out on any of our videos.